We are here at Happy Quill Farms in Palo Alto, California, and I'm with David Winsberg, who is the owner of Happy Quill Farms. David, can you tell me a little bit about your farm? How long have you been here?
We've been here in 34 years. I actually grew up on a 600-acre farm in South Florida, growing mainly 1 or 3 varieties of bell peppers. We've moved, as I said, we started out here and evolved into a pepper farm over the first few years. Now we exclusively do peppers, but have about 30 to 50 cultivars.
Now, David, you were the first person in the world to ever buy a Cravo retractable roof greenhouse for food crops. Everyone else was growing flowers or trees. What was the main factor that made you think about, that made you buy a retractable roof?
Well, here in the Bay Area, we have a fabulous growing season. It's long and the weather's fabulous, but it's often cool at night. So when I first started farming here, this had been an old carnation plastic house. And there were a lot of issues with the plastic house that I found out very quickly. If we didn't open them up at least once every year or two, we had salt buildup in the soils around it because we used drip irrigation. And there were other issues as well with just the growing season where we had too much humidity in the house or too much heat. So I really wanted something that I could remove the roof from to let the rain in during the winter, and yet would give me the ability to extend the season whenever the weather allows, as long as possible.
Now, considering that this soil has been farmed for 35 years and the retractable roof's been over this soil for 15 years, one of the questions I always get is, what about nematode buildup in the soil?
We haven't had serious issues. We had some cucumber root knot nematode in sections where I have grown, whenever I've grown cucumbers in one section for too long. So by moving them from site to site, I've gotten away from that. We haven't seen any serious issues with the peppers. We've ended up with good growth and very little problems. I've used some inoculums in the soil that are supposed to, and some beneficial releases of these various there's some nematodes that are predatory, and we've tried that with all relative success. Basically, it's never become a critical issue. We've never had it destroy a crop.
So, from your opinion, is there a certain timeline? How much longer could you farm in the same soil here under the retractable roof?
I really don't see a limit coming up. We seem to be able to, maintain soil fertility and health without doing any radical changes. I haven't seen disease pressure remains about the same year to year. A lot of times is weather dependent. I'd say that's our biggest factor. If we get too much damp weather, fungal issues become our major factor in ending a season. But soil-borne issues have never developed into radical crop factors.
Now, you had mentioned that you have a rule of thumb that when you retract the roof in the winter, when you're out of season, you have a certain target rainfall that you'd like to get on the soil.
Yeah, ideally, I've found that because of our drip irrigation, the soil buildup of salts is best redistributed with about a good heavy 4 inches. If I can get 4 inches of rain inside in the period between December and March, I can almost be sure that the soil tests will come back without excessive salt. Whereas if I leave it closed through that whole period, I oftentimes will start seeing some early difficulty in my seedlings getting started. So it's critical that I get some rain in here during the winter.
Are you ever retracting the roof during the growing season just to use the rain for irrigation?
Not specifically, no. We have at the end of the season now, I actually will, because as I said, I want to get that 4 inches in, and basically I'm not terribly worried about disease pressure at this point. These plants at this point may go down to disease if we get a long extended period, but it's oftentimes more valuable to let the rain in and let the plants actually just do the best they can. So, the potential is rain isn't going to give a lot of late season damage. Closing it up doesn't necessarily guarantee that I'm not going to get the disease pressure in here anyway.
Now, considering that you were originally an open field farmer and then also grew in conventional greenhouses, what was the biggest challenge that you faced when you made the transition into the retractable roof house?
The biggest transition was just figuring out what the critical factors were. All of a sudden, my old greenhouse was either open or closed, and I had some fans I could run if it got really hot, and I had an evaporative cooling system, but I really had very little in the way of controls. So this all of a sudden gave me the ability. I could heat, I could control, I could. The fabulous thing about it is when the roof's open, I can get absolute 100% sun in here without any UV blockage, which I think UV is one of the most vital disease preventers you can have. Just getting that sunlight in here.
What's been your experience regarding foliar diseases? Because I know you try to grow not organically, but as close as you can to organically, and foliar disease is always a tough thing to manage organically. What's been your experience with foliar diseases in this house in comparison to either the field or the conventional greenhouse?
Well, I found it actually fairly easy to sort of keep an eye on things. We generally scout the field regularly, and if we see powder mildew is one of the most critical ones for here in the Bay Area. Actually, it turns out to be a pretty common disease all through field farms in California. I didn't realize. I'd always associated it with humid weather, but even out in Sacramento, where they got very hot, dry weather, they get powder mildew issues too. So, but we keep an eye on it and have found that just by using very minimal things like organic neem oil and a little bit of potassium bicarbonate, Kelly green, we can control it in those spots and prevent it from spreading. We occasionally use a little peroxide. The oxidate, I think, is the name of the product. But as long as we can sort of keep a minor toehold on it and the weather cooperates, we're fine. At some point it becomes pointless, and I found that even the strongest, whether I'm using Raleigh or Quadris or any number of other typical chemical fungal applications, if the weather isn't cooperating, the plants aren't growing and they're not going to recover. So I actually don't use any of those. I found really by maximizing my weather controls and hoping that the weather is going to cooperate to the best, I actually don't require much in the way of chemical inputs at all.
Now, having growing in the same soil for 30 years, what sort of protocols are you doing as far as amending the soil just to prevent problems?
We have a fairly simple program. I take soil samples usually a couple times a year, pre-season and then mid-season and end of season, and just look and see if we're showing any deficiencies in any of our micros or any minors or majors soil nutrients. But as far as addressing soil-borne pathogens, we found that just rototilling the crop in, and we really have not seen a buildup of soil-borne pathogens to any extent. We still lose. If the weather's bad, we'll see Phytophthora, but it's mainly airborne, not soil-borne. And occasionally, like our cucumbers, when we've left them in one spot for 5-6 years, we'll start seeing a little nematode issues on them. The peppers themselves, though, we're not using specifically resistant types, but we found that things we have never gotten to the point where we've had anything other than acceptable loss. It's never become catastrophic.
How many different varieties are you producing?
In this greenhouse, we probably have about 10 or 12. Altogether, we have about 50. But we mainly put the ones in this in our controlled system here that start the earliest and go the latest, because it's just where this is our main money maker. The outdoor stuff is pretty much just for mid-season. You know, all that stuff comes in July and is done by the end of September. But this one we can start picking in May, and sometimes we've had products coming out of here absolutely beautiful in the middle of February. So, you know, our season can go almost year-round here.
One of the other questions we frequently get is, if I open up the roof, won't all the insects come in? What's been your experiences with regarding insects in comparison to the field and your conventional greenhouse?
You know, I don't know if it's just California, but we don't have. I've really, again, relied on scouting. So we watch. I've had issues where we've let things get out of control. One year we had a whitefly infestation that I let get out of hand. But now I found that with very simple controls, again, using just an oil spray or a little bit of spinosad, we can control insects without ever really having to do major. I don't have a regular spray program. We, again, as I said, we do this all sort of when we start seeing the problem. So I may have sprayed this crop a half a dozen times this year, but we're talking about starting in when these were put in the ground in March, and now it's the beginning of November. So literally, I don't have to. I think it's critical that that we watch for bugs, but we really haven't had to do any sort of other than spot applying and you know, scouting and occasional when the weather has required it. We haven't had to do any sort of heavy-duty applications of insecticides or fungicides.
Well, David, you're the first person in the world to grow food crops in a retractable roof, and I wish to thank you for sharing your experiences with those that are thinking about it. Thanks again.
Thank you.